Okay, so let's get into this. Now, we are going to talk about the Evangelicals for Harris Zoom call that I went to yesterday. Y'all, it was 2.5 hours. And I watched every golden minute of it. So I feel like I have a good feel for what they are up to. And I'm going to try to make this as neutral as I possibly can in reporting my experience on the Evangelicals for Harris Zoom call. Now, as we get into this, I am streaming this on the Center for Biblical Unity website. So I do want to say that the Center for Biblical Unity is a 501c3 nonprofit. So we don't take any official positions about candidates or political parties. Our aim is rather to discuss the Christian worldview and how that might intersect with politics, life in the public square at points. And so nothing I should say on this stream should be taken as any sort of endorsement of any particular person or political party. I am going to try to keep things as neutral as I possibly can. And I'm also human, and I also have a bias. I am a conservative, and I do lean toward conservative issues. But what the word conservative actually means anymore is quickly losing its value. So I do recognize that. But I am really going to try to be fair and balanced in what I say here. And last week on my Theology Mom podcast, if you want to check that out, make sure to download the Center for Biblical Unity app. The mobile app is the best way to get all of our content across all of our platforms. But I shared some thoughts on the Theology Mom podcast last week about why I think my theory, my opinion about why so many evangelicals support Trump, even though we all kind of have it's an open secret that we all kind of know we don't think that Trump is a real born again Christian. We might pray for him, and he certainly seems to have a lot of Christians in his orbit. I think Trump at best could be called a cultural Christian. He's also a deeply flawed person and has certain tendencies that I don't really appreciate about his personality at times. All of that being said, somebody came on my stream and asked, hey, could you do the reverse of this? Of why do Christians vote for Harris? Why do they vote Democrat? And I said on the comment, like, I don't know if I could do that with as much competency because I just haven't interacted with as many people in that stream. But after enduring the 2.5 hour Zoom call yesterday with the Evangelicals for Harris people, I do think that I have a much more operational understanding of why there are a group of evangelicals who will be voting for Harris in this election cycle. And up front, I do want to state that the goal, this is the big picture concept here, okay? The goal of Evangelicals for Harris is to, from them, and you're going to hear their words in just a few minutes, but turn potential evangelical Trump supporters into Harris supporters, Harris voters, I should say. So their goal is to change the minds of evangelicals from Trump to Harris. And that is really, like, in a nutshell, what they are about. And so I want to go over their organization. I want to tell you a little bit about some preliminary research I've done in following the money. And I want to do some summary of what major points were covered on the Evangelicals for Harris Zoom call yesterday and try to explain and represent their position in a fair and accurate way. Maybe this will help you understand some of the people in your own sphere, and maybe will lead to some better, more civil conversations just to try to understand their perspective better. Here is the Evangelicals for Harris website. I'm going to shrink it a little bit so it looks normal. And The headline at the top is Faithful, Compassionate Evangelicals Exercising Our God-Given Citizenship. And somebody's asking in the chat, did they define an evangelical? Yeah, I would say that they did. They took the standard definition of somebody who, believes that there is an idea toward evangelism, sharing the faith, active conversion, but then there's also this core idea of the gospel and salvation by grace alone, through faith alone. I mean, they're kind of putting themselves out there in the broadly Protestant evangelical stream. Although there was one guy on there, I'm not sure, I didn't take the time to look up if he was an Anglican priest or a Catholic priest, but there was some kind of priest on there. So here is their website. This was the Zoom call that I was on yesterday and the information about that. What I want to draw your attention to is how they're positioning the messaging. Why evangelicals support Kamala Harris. And there's a big kind of headline here of upholding Christian values. Evangelicals don't have to change who they are. They just need to reaffirm who they are by voting for someone who better reflects Christian values. So this is the key part of their messaging, is they are not, in their minds, trying to move anybody into being in a more progressive ideological position. They're rather trying to position their messaging to say, you don't need to change you as an evangelical Christian. We're just trying to make our case to vote for someone who better reflects Christian values. So we're going to, and they also position Kamala as being a very strong Christian. Kamala's faith story is a whole page on this website. So you're thinking about, well, what are the values that this website says are Christian? And so leads you to a compare and contrast page on a number of issues of Trump versus Biden and Harris. So the big titles here are economic growth, jobs, manufacturing, healthcare, infrastructure, pandemic management, creation care, which is interesting in light of all the conversation around Megan Basham's book in the last couple of weeks. You can go read this for yourself, but it's basically a compare and contrast page. What's also interesting to me is how they're positioning Kamala as a Christian, even though her mother is a Hindu. And there are news clips of Kamala out there saying that she grew up going to the Hindu temple. But basically, her theology is a loving God, the Good Samaritan, serving others, and a deep respect for all faith traditions. And they want to position her as growing up in the context of the Black church in Oakland, California. And she has a little bit here, and here's her favorite Bible verse. 2 Corinthians 5:7, we walk by faith, not by sight. This verse recognizes that we don't always have all the answers, but we also do not face life's challenges alone. Our loving God is with us. The God I have always believed in is a loving God. It is this God whom Kamala puts her trust. So that's a little bit about the Evangelicals for Harris website. Again, you can just go to evangelicalsforharris.com and read all of that for yourself. So are you, feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go through, and this will be a longer stream because there is a lot to go over here. Okay, now we're going to look at the speakers who they had. And this is from their public Facebook page. As of 2 days ago, they had 60 followers. They were kind of approaching like 800 or 900 at the end of yesterday. So this is a new page. I think they're building it. And this is their speakers that were on there yesterday for the Zoom call. And this is a public post, so I'm going to share it. And a gal named Ekemini Uwan, it was really kind of the moderator. She is a personality on a Christian Black podcast called The Truth's Table. And I would characterize her positions as being fairly different than many of the positions that Monique and I take on race and racism. I would characterize her as definitely in the stream of Christian anti-racism and holding basically to the tenets of anti-racism with a Christianized version of that. So Marcy's asking, how do we persuade our Christian friends who support her to rethink it? Well, I think first is taking the time to learn the positions. And that's why I'm doing this stream, is to help you have better conversations, because the more you take the time to learn what somebody else believes, then the better equipped you become to begin to respond to it or ask strategic questions. And so, all right. There is a video of Monique and I talking about Ekemini Uwan from back in 2019. It's one of the very first videos that we made. So if you want to know more about her, you can see that. Okay. So there are a list going, I'm just only going to highlight just a few people that may be familiar to some of you because of the work through Center for Biblical Unity. Is Jamar Tisby was on there. Latasha Morrison, she's the author of Be the Bridge. Tisby is the author of the book Color of Compromise, and another book coming out. We're going to take a look at some clips here in a minute. This Dr. Reverend Jim Ball is the founder of Evangelicals. He was the founder of Evangelicals for Biden 4 years ago in 2020, and is now spearheading the effort of Evangelicals for Harris. Dwight McKissick, a fairly well-known Southern Baptist pastor. They had a state representative from Texas on there. I have no idea who this guy was. James Tallarico, and some other, Soong Chan Ra might be somebody that you are familiar with. He's done a lot of work on reparations. His books are often recommended, but he is, again, on the other side of the conversation that Monique and I would characterize his position, Tisby's position, Morris's position as being in the Christian anti-racism stream. Also, Lisa Sharon Harper was on the call. This is not to be confused with the white woman named Lisa Harper who has adopted children from Haiti. This is Lisa Sharon Harper. She is an African-American scholar and has been a chapel speaker at Biola a couple of times. So those were some of the people who were on the stream, and each of them came on the stream and gave like little short presentations. I don't know. They seemed like they were about 5 minutes each. They were all very scripted. It was all very professional. It was a mixture of pastors, authors, professors, speakers. They made it very clear that nobody was speaking on behalf of any organizations that they were affiliated with, but rather speaking on their own. My friend Lisa Spencer says, what's interesting is that most of these speakers would not identify themselves as evangelical, but it is okay when supporting a political candidate. Very odd. Yeah, they were, some of them were pretty overt about saying they were evangelical. We're going to talk about how that came up in a way throughout the call. Oh, David Wolcott says, I believe Tallarico was also on the Progressive Christians for Kamala Zoom call with John Pavlovitz. That's interesting. Okay, the big goal. So it's a pop quiz. What's the big goal here of Evangelicals for Harris? It is to convert potential evangelical Trump voters into Harris voters. This is the goal. And so to do that, they want to make the case that Kamala Harris is a Christian and that she is the better option between Trump and Harris, that she reflects the values and the ethos of our faith better than Trump. This was kind of, in my opinion, the goal of the call. And I'm going to play a few clips. I wasn't going to play clips, but then they posted the QR code to take you directly to the Zoom call about halfway through the call yesterday. So you no longer had to register. So I thought, okay, well, now they're kind of opening it up publicly. So we'll see how long this video lasts. If I get a copyright strike, I might have to take it down. But let's start with the founder. I want to introduce you to the founder of Evangelicals for Harris. He was on the call. Elaine is asking, is there a big pool of convertible voters? I wouldn't think there would be. This guy makes a case in the video I'm going to show you in just a minute. He takes credit for winning the election back in 2020. Pretty much. So we'll see. Okay, let's take a look at the founder. His name is Reverend Jim Ball, and he was on the call yesterday. I'm just going to read, no commentary. I'm just going to read what it says on his website. The Reverend Jim Ball, PhD, is the author of Global Warming and the Risen Lord. So that tells me that climate activism is very important to him, and seeing that, making some kind of a case for that through the lens of the Christian worldview. For 20 years, he formerly served as a senior executive in a Christian environmental organization, the architect of What Would Jesus Drive educational campaign. So he's got some thoughts about cars, and the key organizer and national spokesperson for the Evangelical Climate Initiative. Jim has testified before Congress and has appeared on ABC's Good Morning America, Fox, CNN, and NPR. So he's been seen as an official kind of spokeshole for this position by the big networks. He has been featured on the New York Times and honored by Rolling Stone as one of their environmental warriors and heroes, and by Time Magazine as one of the climate change innovators. So about the organization, this is an important point right here. Evangelicals for Harris is a project of Faith Voters for Good, a 501c4 organization. It's a little different than what Monique and I are. We're a 501c3, and not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. Faith Voters for Good exists to support a diverse community of believers pursuing the common good and seeking to build a more perfect union. Our nation thrives when its leaders are people of good character. This was a big theme on the call last night as to making the case for Harris. Many of the speakers said she has better character than Trump, and she is more worthy of your vote. Guided by core issues of faith, integrity, and justice. Some other big themes on the call last night with the speakers. Okay. We continually strive to create a public square and dialogue that lifts up the better angels of our communal nature. All contributions to Evangelicals for Harris through Faith Voters for Good are not tax deductible. So why this matters is we're thinking about a little bit about the money, which I'm going to get into that, but I'm going to play a video clip first, and you will hear from the founder of Evangelicals for Harris, Mr. Jim Ball.
Now, there's a lot of work that has to happen before we win, and so we all have to play our parts, but we are going to win. So, Mike, if you would, please put up my first slide. So I wanted to give you a quick rundown on our success back in 2020. I actually founded Evangelicals for Biden back in 2019, and also then, of course, founded Evangelicals for Harris this year. But in 2020, we became the biggest independent evangelical grassroots campaign ever to support a Democratic presidential candidate. We were focused on some target states, Michigan and Georgia, and we provided strategic support by flipping Trump voters to Biden voters in those two states. Mike, next slide. So we mainly what we did was interact directly with our target audience through engaging them, over 30 million of them through Google Ads, electronic means. We had nearly 5 million people click through our content, and over 80,000 were diverted from QAnon and Trump fundraising websites to our positive content. Next slide. So through those efforts in Michigan, again, we were trying to primarily flip Trump voters into Biden voters. And so through that process, as well as voters, evangelical voters who voted Democrat in the past, we netted 26%. That equals 350,000 votes in Michigan. And Biden-Harris won by 154,000 votes. In Georgia, we netted 16% for 245,000 votes. And Biden and Harris won by 12,670 votes.
So real quick here, he's really taking a lot of credit for a lot of votes. I thought it was interesting that he feels, partially responsible for flipping these two critical states in his efforts to. Whoa, there are 195 people in this stream. I better not screw it up. And so he's making some big claims here. I'm not here to vet whether those are true claims or not. Just letting you know that those are the claims. Okay, let's continue.
So our efforts in those two states were strategic and made the difference. Now, of course, all the other folks who voted helped make the difference there. But without our efforts, the Biden-Harris campaign would not have won in those two states. So we had about a month to do our campaign last time, and we've got much more time this time. So we're looking to really grow our effort and make an even bigger difference this time around. Mike, next slide. So right now we're at 200,000 and growing in terms of folks who've joined us and are ready to work with us.
I have no idea how he gets to this number. Their social media numbers are not at 200,000. I'm assuming he has some mailing list left from the Biden campaign in 2020, and that's how he's getting to this 200,000 number. He never really specified that, but here he's going to explain their goals and what they plan to do and why they want to encourage people to donate.
To elect the Harris Walz ticket. And again, just like in 2020, we're going to be speaking directly to our audience through Google and Facebook ads, through emails. We emailed 40 million in 2020. We're going to be doing more of that this time, through our website and our social media. We'll also, this time, something new, we're going to be organizing and activating our supporters through Zoom calls in the target states. And then another new thing we're going to be doing this year, we'll be running video ads on what's termed addressable TV, like Hulu, Apple, and YouTube. And addressable means you can target households. So this is a new feature. We're going to be spending about $1 million. Maybe even more. We'll see how it goes.
Okay, so that gives you a little flavor for his presentation. I know that those ads, those Hulu ads and targeted ads for Apple TV and stuff, we've actually been looking into those kinds of things for the Walking in Unity book, and they are very expensive. And so then when he says, we're planning to spend $1 million, I thought, yeah, that's about right. So they're really trying to be strategic in targeting this. And what I think is interesting is, how it made me wonder, like, where is all this money coming from? That is a question that I have. And yes, David is saying this appears to be the original Biden Evangelicals for Biden website with a new address and cover setup. That seems to be true. The blog posts go back to 2020 and the campaign. And then after the campaign, the blog posts stop. And then they just picked up a few months ago again. And so it seems like he's re-registered with a new domain and is just tweaking some of the wording. But it's a lot of the core concepts I do think were from the previous Evangelicals for Biden website. It's always interesting to me about how well funded, or maybe this is my perception that I have a confirmation bias that, there's a lot of funding for progressive things. And, it's interesting to me, but I want to show you their funding from 2020. There's no records of funding right now for 2024 of who is funding them. But, there are records from 2020. And there's this website called Open Secrets that you can go in and type in a name and find out like who's funding different organizations that are in the political sphere. So this is for the Faith Voters PAC. And this is the organization that you would donate to Evangelicals for Biden or Evangelicals for Harris. You would go through the Faith Voters, and we're going to look at that link in just a minute. But as you can see here, it looks like it's not a ton of money that they had. So I don't know if they have more money, and I just don't know where to look for it. I'm kind of a novice in looking for money, but they got $60,000 from some group called the Ellison Group, and I looked up their website, and it wasn't overly impressive, but they gave $60,000 back in 2020 to the Reverend Dr. Ball. A philanthropist named John Hunting gave $50,000. Someone named Molly Ross, who works at Deltex Royalty Company, which I think I looked that up. I think it's a law firm. She gave $25,000. And then the donations go down from there, $5,000, $2,500, $2,000, $2,000, and then lower money donors. But I think when I added it all together, it was about 100. I think it was about 150,000. It was a good chunk of change, but it wasn't in the $1 million range. And so I don't know, if he's just building on the momentum from 2020, how he's going to launch himself to this $1 million level. But that is his goal. All right. Now let's talk about how to donate to this entity of Evangelicals for Harris. This is interesting. So when you go to their donate page, if you click on donate here, this big button, it takes you to this page that says Evangelicals for Harris. It has the logo at the top. But if you scroll down, you notice that you are donating. Actually, you're not donating to the Dr. Reverend Jim Ball. You are donating to Act Blue. Now, if you don't know what Act Blue is, it's kind of a grassroots fundraising umbrella for these smaller groups to be able to raise money. So this is one that is set up specifically for the Evangelicals for Biden website. But you are not actually voting or donating to Evangelicals for Biden. And I don't know how those profit sharing things work, if he gets some percentage or some kind of a kickback. I maybe somebody on the stream knows how that works. But you are giving money to Act Blue. And if you've been watching the news at all, you know that Act Blue is kind of a, how can I best describe it? It is a front for raising money for Democrats and progressive causes. And they are being investigated in a couple of states right now for fraud, specifically in Texas. And so this is where all of the BLM donations went, was to Act Blue. And they are specifically a shell for donating money to liberal candidates, Democrats, progressives, and that sort of a thing. So it what I don't know is like what his kickback is, because they're directing people from their website to this Act Blue entity. And if you go on the Act Blue website, it tells you very clearly that they donate to progressive causes. Now, Dr. Ball's effort is part of this larger effort called Faith Voters. Now, notice the wording at the top of the faithvoters.com website: grounded in faith, united for the common good. This common good language is everywhere on these websites. Now, I know that my friend Natasha Crane, I'm reading through her book right now, she has an entire chapter trying to define the common good. But, I'm pretty sure Natasha's vision of the common good is quite different than what is the definition and specific policies and action items that would be seen as the common good by the Faith Voters organization. But here again, we are being told that being an evangelical fits with these values, our values as faith voters. And we have a quote from Mr. Rogers, really on the front of the website. This is about being a better person, being a nice person, volunteering to serve. That was another big theme on the call last night. Join our community. And then if you click on the donate button, it takes you to that same Act Blue website. So let's just look at the values for a minute. Service over partisanship. And then they have an out of context verse. Okay, that's not a neutral statement. This is me inserting my opinion. They have a quote from Ephesians 1 that I think is taken out of context and doesn't connect or support what they're trying to say here. Service over partisanship. Purpose over politics. They have another Bible verse there. Action over empathy. People over policy. And so really a lot of this messaging is geared to speak the language as an insider to an evangelical who maybe doesn't like Trump, and they're wondering if their conscience will let them vote for Harris. And so, all right. Is this helping anyone? Are you ready to transition into the part about the call? So this is all the background of who is Evangelicals for Harris. Most of the speakers last night started their talks by stating what I would maybe characterize as their evangelical qualifications. Why are you here on this call? And are you really an evangelical? And so many of the speakers started with kind of their resume of why I am an evangelical. You can trust me. I've grown up in conservative churches. I've been discipled by the big ministries. You can trust me. I'm an evangelical. And I wanted to put a montage together, but I couldn't do it. It was too much time. So I'm just going to play you one example. This is from Lisa Sharon Harper, and she is explaining her credentials as an evangelical and why people should listen to her. And again, Lisa Sharon Harper has been a chapel speaker at Biola University in the past. It's been several years, but she's been there. All right, here we go.
Thank you so much, Akemini. I walked down the aisle at a Sunday evening camp church meeting on August 21st, 1983. It was about 9:30 p.m. at this campground in Cape May, New Jersey, when I gave my life to Jesus. And I was baptized in a stream on the side of a mountain at the Creation Music Festival while I was in high school. I was raised up in the faith by my local church and discipled in Young Life High School ministry, Cruise undergrad ministry, and InterVarsity's graduate ministry, and eventually went on staff with InterVarsity for about 10 years. I am an evangelical. Through Young Life, I learned faith can be super fun. Through Crew's Here's Life Inner City Ministry, I learned God loves the poor and the marginalized. Through InterVarsity, I learned that I love the scripture. So here's what the scripture has taught me. People matter. All people matter. Because the image of God matters. Because the kingdom of God matters.
Okay, hopefully that was better. So anyways, what I wanted you to get from that is I thought it was a really good example of what many of the speakers did on the call. They gave their credentials as an evangelical. So there she is. She's talking about Young Life and Crew and walking the aisle and having a salvation experience and all of that, and then tying that into, her faith and what the Bible taught her, that, everyone matters. And so that was a very common theme on the call last night. Many people did something to that effect. Many people also, and this is a sentiment that I would agree with, many of them said, hey, there's no perfect person to run for president. Many evangelicals who support Trump will say the same thing. There's no perfect person. We're not voting for Sunday School Teacher of the Year. Trust God in his sovereignty for the outcome. Those are some things that I think both sides, I've heard on both sides, whether it's Evangelicals for Harris or Evangelicals for Trump. Many of the speakers mention, not many, that would be an overstatement. Some, we'll say some of the speakers mentioned that they affirm traditional marriage, but also that they want to make a country that's big enough for those who don't affirm traditional marriage. A couple said, that they were firmly for traditional marriage, but there was really no difference between voting for a Republican and a Democrat. And I'm going to play you a clip that explains what they meant by that. And so they felt comfortable with making the transition from voting Republican to voting Democrat. A few mentioned that they had voted Republican in the past, but were voting for Harris this time. And a repeated theme on the call was that the reason that they were not going to vote for Trump is because Trump is a bully who degrades the humanity of image bearers. That was a really big and repeated theme by a number of the speakers last night. So I think that it's important to put this into its proper context. And that's really what I'm trying to do here, is rather than just getting all in our feelings about it, really trying to understand and steelman the arguments to the best of our ability so that we really understand what people are arguing on the other side of the conversation. Somebody's making a comment on here about Crew and their doctrinal drift, but keep in mind that Lisa Sharon Harper would have been involved in Crew and InterVarsity activities, like 30 years ago. So I don't think that that's a fair comment to make about her Christian testimony at this point. Try in the comments to focus on understanding and listening to learn rather than attacking. That's not super helpful and not in the spirit of what I'm trying to do here. Although I have strong disagreements with many of these speakers, I really want to cultivate an environment here of learning and hearing and listening for the purpose of learning so that we can have better, more informed engagement. So just kind of going to put that out there. Okay. All right. Now I want us to try to play a clip. Hopefully this works. From Dwight McKissick. He's a Southern Baptist pastor, very prominent pastor. He's an African-American. And he really explains from his perspective why he plans to vote for Kamala. And I thought that this would probably be the case that would resonate with most evangelicals that I know.
As a citizen of God's kingdom and America, and after much soul searching, I have concluded that the better person and best qualified person in this election between the two major party nominees is by far Madam Vice President Kamala Harris. Voting for the best qualified candidate and the better person rather than voting strictly along party lines should be the guiding principle in determining who to vote for as President of the United States. We have seen one candidate incite an insurrection, indicted and convicted for 34 felony crimes, and engage in name-calling and insults as a campaign strategy. America, we can do better than this. Only one candidate has the temperament and track record to bring a sense of unity and forward movement toward the lofty goal expressed in our Pledge of Allegiance, and that is to become one nation under God with liberty and justice for all. God said to Moses, "Speak to my people that they may go forward." I believe America can go forward under Madam Vice President Kamala Harris. Donald Trump seeks to divide us. Kamala Harris seeks to unite us. I believe that life begins at conception, and innocent unborn life in the womb must be protected. I believe in the sanctity of marriage between a man and a woman. I believe that the image of God is stamped across every person in the world, and they must be treated with dignity and respect. I have voted overwhelmingly Republican in my adult life. Much of what Republicans said they believed in aligned with and what I was taught as a child, such as personal responsibility, traditional family values, marriage between a man and a woman, fiscal responsibility, life begins at conception, and unborn life must be protected. I have seen in the Republican platform them abandon a commitment to ban abortion with a constitutional amendment, along with a commitment to marriage between two persons of the same sex.
Okay, I want to make a quick comment here about what Pastor McKissick is saying in this clip. Is that he's explaining that the problem with the Republicans is that their current platform that they just adopted a few weeks ago doesn't affirm a pro-life position anymore. It doesn't affirm life. And so even though he holds to traditional marriage and protecting the unborn, I'm going to take that as a good faith statement that that's where he's at. He's saying, look, the thing that why I was holding on to being a conservative or being a Republican doesn't exist anymore. So what's the difference with me voting for Harris? Now he's going to make his case for why he wants to vote for Harris. And I want to encourage you, like, if you're so triggered by listening to what other people believe, like, you need to kind of check in with yourself, because we cannot be so triggered emotionally by listening to somebody that holds a different point of view, no matter how wrong we feel like it is, that we don't take the time to really hear out what they're trying to say. Because if we're going to engage in persuasion and we want to persuade that person to think something else, then we're going to have to keep our emotions calm enough that we don't just react to every little thing. So, I think it's a fair point, as Elaine says, that Pastor McKissick is commenting about the drift for the Republicans. I think it's a fair point. Something I've thought about as well. Just think about these. I want to talk about Victoria's question too. She says, "What are good questions to ask those who support Harris without sounding snarky or arrogant?" Just ask them, why do you support them? Why is that important to you? Why, ask a question, inquire. Why does this matter to you? Why is, and then you could go into like, well, do you agree with all of her positions? Because I think many of us on the Trump side would say, well, yeah, there's things I disagree with Trump about, but overall, I think he's a better candidate, and here's why. That's what they're arguing too. They're saying, look, I'm not with Harris on LGBT issues. I'm not with Harris on abortion, but I think she's the best candidate, and here's why. So let's listen now to what Pastor McKissick has to say.
I'm very disappointed in their abandonment. I don't see any moral superiority of one party over the other, and therefore in this election, I am voting for the better person and the best qualified candidate, Madam Vice President Kamala Harris. If God had wanted something other than a family, he would have had us to call him something other than Father. My hope ultimately is not in the kingdom of this world, but in the kingdom of God. And in this season, the candidate that's best suited to bring unity to our land is Kamala Harris.
Okay, so that's his case. He says, look, I acknowledge I voted Republican for most of my life. I was raised this way. I felt like the values were more consistent with my faith when I was voting Republican, but now I'm changing because some of the reasons I was voting Republican no longer exist. And I'm feeling like Kamala is the better choice because I think she'll bring unity. Now, we could debate whether or not we agree with that. Will Kamala bring unity? Personally, I'm a skeptic of that position. But if we're going to have better political conversations, we've got to learn how to listen, to learn, rather than just jumping right into our emotions. Okay. Affirming human dignity was another big reason given last night over and over again for why people were choosing to vote for Harris. Helping immigrants and refugees and helping the poor. This was a big common theme for many speakers. I'm just going to play one clip. This one is from Lisa Sharon Harper, where I think she did a very nice job of expressing this ethos.
The scripture taught me that. Now, can we talk here? Kamala Harris. She is not running to be Messiah. She is not running to be perfect or some kind of prophet or anything. She is running to be the president of the United States of America.
Let's concede that very same reasoning is used by evangelicals who want to vote for Trump. Okay, that same reasoning. So if you don't like her reasoning, you have to check in with yourself about using that reasoning for Trump, with saying, well, I don't agree with him on every policy. He's not a perfect person. I recognize his flaws. Okay, but that's what she's arguing. And so we have to be fair and true about that.
The leader of the executive branch in a democracy, a democratic republic, a form of government that aims to protect the inherent dignity of all, especially the least of these. Democracies do this through the rule of law, not dictators, through institutions that place checks and balances on executive power to prevent the rise of a dictator. Now, Donald Trump, he has been clear. He aims to dismantle democracy. He has already said it. He has said he will be a dictator on day one. He even told us point blank, evangelicals, vote for me. You will never have to vote again. Hello. But Vice President Kamala Harris is not going to bring heaven down to earth. And we don't need her to do that because Jesus already signed up for that job. We need our next president to move us in the direction of the vision of the hungry being fed, the thirsty having clean water to drink, the migrant and immigrant and asylum seeker being welcomed, the sick being cared for, the over-policed being set free, and the poor having enough. We need our next president to govern in ways that bless the image of God in all, not curse it. So I and my house will cast our vote for the candidate who has the best opportunity to move us in the direction of that kingdom vision. And that candidate is Madam Vice President Kamala Harris. And I look forward to pulling every lever of our great democracy when she enters office in order to push her on the issues where we disagree.
Okay, so I think that this is a really good example of her saying, look, there are some policies that I agree with her on. Now, you and I might disagree with Mrs. Harper about, the best implementation for helping the poor, or the question of, well, can we help immigrants but also have secure borders? Like we can talk about that. But she's making it very clear that she does not agree with every policy that Kamala Harris has, but she thinks that it is the better reflection of her faith as a Christian to vote that way. Now, if we're going to be fair, we have to acknowledge that many evangelicals who are going to vote for Trump argue a very similar thing. They argue that, well, I don't agree with all of Trump's policies, but I think that he presents something that is more in line with my faith, or I like his policies better, and that sort of a thing. So the argumentation is somewhat parallel. Now, again, we can disagree over the policies. We can talk about that, and that's fine. But if we're listening to understand, we have to get to a point where we really understand the other person's positions and can accurately respond to those rather than just being in our feelings. And so the theme of human dignity, helping the poor, immigrants, welcoming immigrants and refugees was a big theme on the call. Many speakers addressed that. I just picked one clip for the sake of time. Now, I don't know if you caught it in there, but another big concern that a few people mentioned was they have a real fear that Trump is going to dismantle the government, that he is going to install himself as a dictator on the first day of his inauguration. I don't understand this objection. If I had a person who believed that in front of me, I would really want to probe with a question, well, how did you arrive at that belief? I've listened to quite a lot of Trump speeches, and I've never heard him say that. So, what's your evidence? What's your data for that? And because many of them expressed this fear. And I'm thinking, wow, this is a big reason why some of them are choosing Harris. They think that she offers a pathway to literally save our country and save democracy. Now, personally, I'm telling you my personal opinion. I see that issue very differently. I am not optimistic that a vote for Kamala Harris will preserve our country. I think it'll be just the opposite. But we would have to debate that and debate those receipts. But if we're just listening to learn, this was a big learning thing for me of how did you arrive at that conclusion? Like what are your receipts for that? Like, I don't know if this is some talking point that's on MSNBC or some station that I don't watch. I don't really watch news anymore. I get most of my news from other sources, but I don't watch Fox or anything like that. But I would really want to investigate that if I had somebody in front of me. And it's a peculiar view to me because he was already president and everything's okay. So I don't know. That was something, though, that I learned on the call. Another big theme that came out, many speakers said that they are pro-life. This, I don't know if there's polling data or what, but almost everybody talked about the fact that they were pro-life, because I guess they've got to overcome the perception that a vote for Harris is basically a vote for, from our side of the conversation, a vote for Harris is seen as a vote for ripping children in the womb from limb to limb, or throwing them away in an IVF lab. Like, we have some strong views about how to best be pro-life and what that means. No, there wasn't a lot of evidence given last night. It was mostly just positions, because they're kind of talking to people that mostly already agree with them and are getting their information from the same source. Let's see here. Trump gave an interview where he said he would be a dictator just on day one in office to close the borders and increase drilling. Okay. Maybe that's where they're getting the idea. I don't know. So, yeah. Yes, Pam says it's a talking point from the mainstream media based on a comment Trump made as a jest. Well, I'll tell you, these people are afraid. This was a fear. Like on the Evangelicals for Trump side of the conversation, a lot of us are afraid of things like the World Economic Forum and security, and we have a lot of concerns around that and some fears around that. Their big fear was that Trump would become a dictator and they would never vote again. This is literally a fear for them. So, yeah. All right. So many of them said they were pro-life. A couple said they were explicitly against abortion. You heard Pastor McKissick say that. One Black pastor said he thought that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare, in the old 1970s safe, legal, and rare line, but allowable in cases of rape and incest. And my immediate thought was, well, that's Trump's view. Like, that's no different than Trump's view on abortion. So I don't know if maybe they haven't gotten the memo about Trump's view on abortion. I don't know. It was a little confusing to me. Many people told the audience to stop being a one-issue voter. To my recollection, nobody specified what the one issue was, but reading between the lines, I'm thinking it was abortion. But I don't know. But that was a big theme last night. Many people mentioned about the one issue voter and don't be that, and that's not a good idea. Okay, so while we're on the pro-life conversation, there was a lot of, and Megan Basham brings this up in her book, and I really want to do a stream just about this issue at some point, but how the pro-life movement is being redefined. We've all known until 5 minutes ago that what we mean when we say pro-life is we're talking about protecting the preborn in the womb. That's what we're talking about. But progressives want to redefine what it means to be pro-life and to make it this big, broad umbrella term. So I'm going to play a clip for you now by a woman who she lost her child tragically in the Sandy Hook shooting about 12 years ago. So it's a very sad story that she shares, but toward the end of her little speech, she talks about what it means to be pro-life. And she and her husband, she talked a little bit about their testimony and everything, all of her bona fides for that she's a real evangelical. So here's what she said toward the end about pro-life issues.
I will trust him. 6 months later, my husband and I found ourselves in Connecticut in a firehouse. 26 people were murdered in the largest mass shooting at an elementary school to date. Our son survived, but our daughter was one of the 26. And yet we said, I know that my Redeemer still lives. Her homegoing was held at the largest Protestant church in New England, a Black church, the First Cathedral of Bloomfield. Her body carried in a princess chariot by horses, donated by a funeral home. Though he slay me, we still trust him. We know who God is. I know who God is, and we still trust in Jesus. What we cannot make sense of is the proliferation of prosperity gospel, our inability to respond to suffering people, and our propensity to make soft beds for racism, xenophobia, for all of these phobias, for misogyny, for abuse, for gun violence, and so much more. I have questions for God, but mostly I have questions for us. What will we do for the broken? How will we respond? What will our legacy be in the face of what we see now? I don't know that we have ever, as a family, endorsed a candidate. As a matter of fact, no, we haven't. But I understand that we must keep the pressure on Vice President Harris and Governor Walz in order to get help for more people, including mothers who hold dying and dead children in and outside of the United States. I also firmly believe we stand a better chance of doing all of the things we want to do with them than with any alternative. I would also like to acknowledge and thank President Biden and Vice President Harris and this entire administration for establishing the first ever Office of White House Gun Violence Prevention, and our Surgeon General for openly declaring gun violence as a public health issue. As evangelicals, we should be leading the justice movement. This was what Jesus spent his entire life doing, but we are often silent. Ending gun violence is pro-life. Feeding children is pro-life. Ending war is pro-life. Ending student debt is pro-life. Strong public education is pro-life. Healthcare is pro-life. Libraries, open and free and well-funded libraries, is pro-life. Ensuring generous conditions for the widow, the captive, the blind, the brokenhearted. The gospel of Jesus is rooted in justice, not bluster, mercy, not bravado. There is a reason people bristle when they hear Christian or thoughts and prayers. So many of us have chosen platitudes and piety over keeping our neighbors safe. We have traded the great witness of Christ for the whiteness of nationalism.
Okay. So I think that she gives a really good snapshot into the thinking of a lot of evangelicals are going to vote for Biden. She mentions white nationalism at the end. That was another big theme last night on the call, is the problem at its root is white Christian nationalism and the racism problem. She also mentions that. But did you notice how the pro-life terminology was even libraries are pro-life and full access and fully funded? I'm like, surely she's not talking about those horrible books that our friend John Amakuchu is trying to keep out of public schools. I want to give her the benefit of the doubt that she's not talking about those queer books for middle schoolers. But if you noticed her verbiage there of the pro-life, there was a couple other people who did similar things where they were just looking at the pro-life, redefining pro-life so that it's no longer just about we're protecting the preborn in the womb. It's food supply and universal preschool and fully funded libraries and all of this. And so then you can kind of fly every social program under the banner of pro-life and love your neighbor. And this was a big theme for a lot of the speakers last night, and looking to government to solve these problems, which, as a conservative, I would have a different perspective on that. But if we're listening to learn, it was a learning experience for me to hear kind of her thought process and all of that. Let's see. Yeah, she didn't mention drag queen story hour at libraries. So I want to give her the benefit of the doubt that that's not what she was referring to. But that kind of brings me to some key themes that were never discussed last night. Transing kids, drag queens in public spaces, and men in women's sports. To me, those were three really big issues that never came up. There was no conversation about border security or crime or any of those things. It was all very focused on messaging for being pro-life, but then redefining that, help for the poor, the marginalized, the immigrant, the refugee. And that was a lot of the messaging. Okay. Got a couple more clips here. All right, this next one is from Latasha Morrison, who is the author of Be the Bridge. And I don't in any way want to get into conversations about her motivation for what she does. She has a ministry that I would say is fairly similar to what we do, and I don't want to disparage her work. So please, like, try to refrain from that. I just want to look at what she's saying here about her position and why she thinks that voting for Harris is the best choice. And again, we're getting insights into how people think.
In the work that I do and how I write, truth and grace are the centerpiece. You see, grace is something that is a part of God's nature. It is the foundational understanding that God is love. Our love births grace. In 1 John 4:8, it says, whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. I look at which candidate is leading me to love the other. Which candidate is leading us towards compassion? Which candidate is leading us to walk out the Sermon on the Mount, which is the blueprint of love? This verse implies that God's actions, including the gift of grace, stem from his loving nature. I also look at this work as grace as a gift. Ephesians 2:8-9 articulates that grace is a gift from God. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and not by yourselves. It is a gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. This idea that grace is a gift indicates that it is given to us out of love, that is not earned. And so if our grace isn't earned, it's not through any human effort. And so it's important for me in this work that I do, that DEI doesn't become a word that is weaponized and criminalized, because diversity is about all people. Equity sets a pathway for everyone. It's important in this work that I do that the word of wokeness, being awakened to the racial injustice, does not become a criminalized word. It's important in this work that the Imago Dei and all people is not criminalized because they come from a different country or they speak a different language. God's love is demonstrated through Christ. He expresses the depth of his love and is connected to grace. But God demonstrates his love toward us, and while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Here we see sacrificial act of Jesus and the manifestation of grace rooted in divine love. And I think that is important in this conversation. And I wanted to remind us, even here tonight, that this blueprint of the credible witness that we should all be and what we should look for in this race. And I feel that in this race, Representative Vice President Harris has these qualities. And in the Sermon on the Mount, it says, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. A credible witness, you see, bears a witness to the lifestyle of that of humility and vulnerability. And that is what we see in Blessed are the pure in spirit. We should always have an attitude of repentance. And I see that more so in Vice President Harris. We should become listeners and learners when we demonstrate our meekness, because meekness is a picture of power and strength under control. And I see that in Vice President Harris. I think it's important that we remember this and that we make sure that we are voting with mercy and compassion at the forefront.
Okay, there's a lot there, but I wanted to get the whole context of what she was saying. But basically, her rationale for voting for Harris is that she feels like Harris is a leader and she's leading on love. She sees meekness and a spirit of repentance in Harris more than Trump. She also wants to save diversity, equity, and inclusion because she sees that as being an important part of her work at Be the Bridge. And I think it's a very interesting statement. And I would agree with her. I would say if you feel like DEI is foundational to your work at Be the Bridge, then yes, a vote for Harris makes sense. She does not want to criminalize, using her words, anything related to wokeness, which again, she sees as part of her work at Be the Bridge. So those reasons are part of the reasons that make sense to me as to why she would want to vote for Harris. And, it makes me, I'm old enough to remember like growing up, and I think I was in grad school, I guess, when Clinton was president. And, people were making appeals for, we want to vote for a person of character. Clinton has bad character, so he shouldn't be president. He's not qualified to be president. Well, evangelicals for Harris are making a similar argument. They're saying Trump has bad character, somewhat like Republicans said about Bill Clinton back in the 90s. We see Harris as having better character. This is their argument. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that. I would have a lot of questions about that position, but I think that they are making an argument on character, and this is sort of the thrust of several of the speakers last night, was making an argument based on character. I think Latasha Morrison is the clip that I chose to play to sort of typify that. It's part of the rationale, I guess, is another reason that they would vote for Harris that way. Almost done with this. I have one clip left. There were several African Americans who kind of led the conversation in the first half of the call. And then they had some white people and mixed in with a few Asians. I think there was at least a couple of Latino women that were on there too. And mostly in the second half of the call. But I wanted to just play one clip from a white pastor. And again, he was giving his, credentials. He graduated from Trinity Evangelical Divinity School. And he looks like he's about my age. And I'll tell you that when I was in seminary, going to TEDS was like the best evangelical seminary you could go to. It was the most prestigious. Talbot was up there, but TEDS was really the number one. And so he's really wanting us to understand, I graduated from TEDS and, 20, 30 years ago, that was a very prestigious school. So, all right, let me just play this clip really fast and we'll comment on it and be done. This guy's name is Joey Cochran. I've never heard of him. I don't know anything about him.
If we continue on the trajectory that we've been on, I worry as a father that children throughout the United States are not going to hear the history that we need to lament. And I am terrified that citizens are going to lose rights that they spent 150 years gaining the rights to have. Black citizens being able to vote, women being able to cast their ballot, and hearing constantly even new arguments that women shouldn't vote today. These things give me fear for my children.
Okay. So the reason I played this clip is because he talks about fear. And fear is a theme that I also hear Trump supporters talk a lot about. They also have fears for their children. So if we're listening to learn, we want to understand what the fears are on the other side of the conversation. Now, we could debate whether or not those are real fears, or where did you get these fears? How did you arrive at that conclusion? What is your data for that? All of those questions. But his fears are that his Black friends will never be able to vote again. Their voting rights will be taken away. Their children will not be able to learn the history that we need to lament. I'm interpreting that to mean Black history, that somehow Black history is going to be stripped from the public schools, and we will only learn about the noble parts of our history and not the unnoble parts of our history. And he's also concerned, about women losing the right to vote, and that he's fearful that the country that he grew up in and loved will no longer exist. That's a very similar fear that I hear evangelical Trump supporters talk about too. Now, again, we can debate whether the fears are warranted on either side. I think it's a fair conversation. We can debate the data and all of that. But I wanted to play this clip because it typified another theme on the call last night about fear, that these people really, truly have a lot of fear of losing the country that they grew up in and that they love. And so, yeah, just putting that out there. There were a couple of mentions when the clip we saw earlier with the mom of the daughter who got killed at Sandy Hook. She very briefly made a passing mention related to Israel, stopping the war in Israel, stop bombing Gaza. That was not a big theme last night, but there were 2 or 3 people who mentioned that. So that was also on people's radar. Again, much like Trump supporters, many affirmed that there are issues where they disagree with Harris. But to my recollection, no specifics were given other than maybe Dwight McKissick, who was quite forthright about affirming traditional marriage and his concerns about abortion. But for the most part, like I said before, to my recollection, there was no mention about the problems of transing kids or social emotional learning or comprehensive sexuality education, drag queens in public spaces, men and women's sports, locker rooms and bathrooms. There was nothing like that was talked about on the call. One thing I did not talk about, maybe if I can get Kevin on next week, maybe we'll do something on this, but Jamar Tisby was on the call and he gave a whole little professorial lecture about white Christian nationalism and how that's the root of all of the division in our country today. So I'm not going to play any clips because it's just a whole other tangent and I want to end this. But that's about it. There you have it. They've made their case. Obviously, I know that some of you might not be persuaded. Hopefully, I did a good job of being fairly neutral in my language. Again, Center for Biblical Unity is a 501c3 nonprofit. We do not take any specific political positions as a ministry. We do not endorse any candidates. Our focus is on commenting on the Christian worldview and where it intersects with issues related to politics and public policies. But nothing I said on the stream should be taken as an endorsement of any particular person or party. And I look forward to your feedback. I don't know if this was helpful or not, but it was 90 minutes of your life. So thank you for being here. Please share the show if you found it helpful. Send me your thoughts, feelings, and opinions. I'd love to hear from you if you found this sort of exercise helpful. Thank you so much. God bless and good night.